Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us first thing this morning. My name is Laurie Kolka, and I'm a member of the PVAAS statewide team. Prior to joining the team about 2 years ago, I was a district administrator, and I'm so happy to see the district represented in the room. Yay. So I'm glad you're here with us today. We're going to be talking specifically about PVAAS student level data, and our focus is going to be through a math lens. However, PVAAS data is also available in ELA. So it's not just math, it works the same way for both. So if any of you have responsibilities across content areas, this session is for you. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Jen, to introduce herself.
Good morning. I'm Jen Ross. I'm also a member of the PVAAS statewide team. I actually sit on the western half of this state. But we are both here to support, obviously, the use, the understanding of PVAAS in many different ways. So I've been on the team for about 16 years. Prior to that, I was at an IU as sort of a data specialist before that. So good to be here.
So while both of us work for IU 13, Lancaster, Lebanon, we do have responsibilities across the state. So much of our time is spent consulting with educators, educational leaders on the use of data to make decisions. So being at the MTSS conference is like right up our alley. So we're really excited to be here today. So let's get started. If you have any questions, today we ask that you just ask them. Indicate, raise your hand. We're happy to answer questions throughout today's session. So because we're at the MTSS conference, we wanted to just start with the grounding of MTSS in Pennsylvania. You'll see two different images on the slide, and you're probably very familiar with these images. One is the elementary structure for MTSS, and then the other is the secondary structure. Things that they have in common. Both of them have the cycle in common: define, analyze, implement evidence-based practices, and evaluate. The difference is that Pennsylvania recognizes more of a 3-tier system in elementary, where in secondary it's more of a 2-tier system with a lot going on in that core instruction. So when we're talking about the use of data to inform instruction, that data is available at both the elementary and the secondary levels and can help inform decisions at both the core level, or tier 1, and then also tiers 2 and 3. So that's what we're going to be structuring our time together. This is us, as we mentioned. I'd love to hear who you are. So for our, do we have any district leaders in the room with a show of hands? How about teacher leaders? Teachers? Got a bunch of teachers. Okay, welcome. Instructional coaches. 2 instructional coaches. Data specialists? A data specialist, 2 data specialists with us too. Who am I missing? School leaders, principals. Oh, a bunch of principals joining us today too. IU staff, patent staff. Got them up front. Thank you. And who did I miss? I must have missed somebody. All right. Well, throughout today's session, we'll try to make sure that we target our comments and questions to the roles that are present in the room. So here's what we're going to do. I guess, what was it, Jen? Last week, the PVAAS data release happened. And with the data release also are the new features of student data tiles. And these student data tiles are now available to provide a lot of information to help you answer your student-based decisions. So to answer questions such as, what growth did the educational system have as the student moved from year to year? So we're going to be revealing some student data that would help to answer this question. What's the student achievement trend based on the state and maybe local assessment data? Data is available to help answer that question. And is this what we expected to see? Or is this what was predicted based on their prior assessment history? And then also, how is this student expected to perform or predicted to perform on upcoming assessments? And when I say that, those are assessments that students haven't taken yet. So what is the projection, or what is the prediction for how well a student might score on an upcoming PSSA, Keystone, AP exam, PSAT, SAT, ACT, all of those? And why are we talking about these questions? Well, when it comes to MTSS math program discussion, it can help answer these questions as you're working with your student population, as you're working with your teachers. Is the student on a path to proficiency or above? Is the instructional programming working for this student? Should the student continue to receive tier 2 or 3 supports? How does the student's needs relate to the health of the system as a whole? And maybe should they be recommended for additional supports? So all of these questions help to inform that discussion on should a student's program be modified? Should they keep doing what they're doing? Is there any changes that we should see? Now, today I would invite you to play along with data sets that are available. Some of you might have access to PVAAS. So I would say that if you do have access to PVAAS with a username and a password, you can certainly get out your laptops and connect and join us. We will have a demo account. So if you do have a device, a laptop, a smart something, then you can log in with our demo account, or you could even log in with your own data so that you can see what we're talking about in real time. Now, here are some things about PVAAS account access. For the teachers in the room, in order to view the reports, you'll need to either be a school user or a district user, and you need to have student level access allowed. So principals in the room, I think probably you would have that as a default. Teachers in the room, you could have that, depending on what your district has decided. So you might find that you do have student level access, or if you don't have student level access, that is controlled locally at your level, so you could ask for that access. And just a note, there is a hierarchy for PVAAS account creation. District admin account holders, that's typically a superintendent, they create district users and they create school admins, and school admins are typically principals in those roles. And then the school admin, typically the principal, creates the school user accounts. So depending on your role, that might give you an idea of who to go to if you don't currently have access to this data. All right, and we're going to jump into PVAAS in just a few slides. But I wanted to point out today's presentation. So there is PVAAS data that's available throughout the site and in lots of different ways. And the data can help inform decisions at all sorts of levels. So it can inform decisions at the system level, at the top. So generally, how healthy is your system? Is your system moving students forward? And we're going to do a deeper dive into that at the 11 a.m. session that we're doing. Also for program evaluation. If you're running particular programs, maybe you have federal programs, Title I, you're running a specific intervention, you have a specific resource that you're looking at. Program evaluation, that data is also available within PVAAS, and we're going to talk about that at 11 a.m. as well. What we're talking about today at our 8 a.m. session is student level data. So the identification of students in need of support in the MTSS framework. All right. So in a lot of our webinars that we do across the state or resources that we share, we have this slide that talks about 3 levels of use. I guess I should ask, has anyone joined a PVAAS webinar or session in the past? With a show of hands. Okay, so we have a few returning, but mostly newbies, so welcome. So this is an image that we use to talk about the levels of data and the types of data that are available out there to make decisions. At the top of the triangle there, you can see that we've called out 4 different types of data: demographic data, perceptual data, process data, and student learning data. There's all types of data that go in to build a system. And we're saying that these 4 types of data can help lead to decisions at the school level, at the grade and subject level, and then of course at the student level. So each level of decision making has a different purpose for using growth measures. So depending on the data source, depending on the level, the use of the data might look a little bit different. So again, today we're at 8 a.m. We're going to really be talking about this tip, student level data. And because we're in PVAAS, much of the data that we have in PVAAS is based on student learning. though we do have some demographic data available in PVAAS as well. And we are the statewide PVAAS team. So you can guess what our favorite data source is. PVAAS, right? But it's not the only data source. So we are really big advocates for using multiple sources to make decisions. So multiple measures of data should, and you're probably using that all the time, definitely continue the use of multiple sources of data. So what are those? Maybe previously received intervention services. Who has a local assessment plan? So like you use something to track progress. STAR, MAP, Acadians, all of that stuff. Yeah, that's really important because that's going to track your progress throughout the year. You can make those decisions as the year progresses. So in addition to the previously received intervention students, locally administered assessments, PVAAS is going to help with the last 4 bullets. Achievement history, past expectations of achievement, growth at the LEA or district level, at the school level, at the subject level, and even at the teacher level. And then also how students are projected to perform in the future. So that's a little bit about why we're spending some time together today. The next part is just an overview of what PVAAS is, if you don't have a background in that. So before I move on fast, are there any first thoughts, first questions? Okay, then let's give a little bit more information, then we'll stop again. So what is PVAAS? I said we're a member of the PVAAS statewide team. What is PVAAS? Is it a person, thing, object? It's a data analysis tool is what PVAAS is. It works in data analysis and visualization, and it is available for all public educators in Pennsylvania. And what PVAAS is able to do is PVAAS is able to take the assessment history, the demographic fields, the school structures of all of our districts in Pennsylvania longitudinally. So over the past, Jen will know this answer, 16 years, 20 years?
Since 2006, we went statewide.
Since 2006. So we utilize all of the student data since 2006 to build these models to help visualize data for you to make decisions today. So here, turn and talk. So let's go hit your elbow partner and tell them about something you know about PVAAS. It can be anything you know about PVAAS. Do you know something about growth? Do you know something about projections? Do you know that you utilize the data source? Do you know that you've never seen the data source? So take a minute and just elbow partner. All right. Thanks for telling your neighbors something about PVAAS. Is there 1 or 2 people who would want to tell me what they said? Tell me what you talked about. What do you know about PVAAS? Honestly, that helps me as a statewide team to know what's most commonly known about PVAAS. So what did you tell your neighbor? Thank you.
That it just shows like student
Perfect.
everything that you already said earlier.
Perfect. So PVAAS shows student growth, right? We have some measures that would indicate how a group of students grew throughout the school year. Fantastic. Did anyone say something different about PVAAS? Thank you.
It gives predictions according to like how they would do on the keystones or upper assessments.
It gives predictions, it's exactly right, about how students will perform on a test they haven't taken. And I promise you, these were not planted audience members because this is exactly my next slide. These are the 2 things you should know about PVAAS. That 1, it has data on looking back on how the system has performed. So we use that image of a side view mirror to indicate like when you're driving and you're looking back, that's all the stuff that's behind you. That has happened. So we have measures saying like, all right, for that work that's been done, how effective were we at growing our students? And we call that value added growth data. Also looking back are tests that kids took. Like the in springtime, when we had PSSAs, in springtime, when we had Keystones, like that's behind us. So that becomes part of the looking back frame too. So student progress and their testing history, that's looking back. The other thing you should know about PVAAS is that we have looking forward data, and that's a picture of a windshield. So that's data that hasn't happened yet. And we call those student projections, and those are student projections to achievement. So when we're looking back, we're talking about growth, and when we're looking forward, we're talking about achievement. And that's really what you should know about PVAAS, is that it has data in both of those areas, and that's exactly what our audience said, so perfect. So before I told you that we're going to be talking, what we'll be talking about in this session, there are different reports, different data visualizations for different purposes. And at the system level, that would be your value-added growth report, growth of student groups, and diagnostic reports. All of that is looking back at how effective your system was at growing students. Same thing for program evaluation. Diagnostic reports are really great for program evaluation because you can get very specific about which groups of students showed great growth. Today, right now at 8, we're going to focus on the student reports that are available in PVAAS. So for those of you who have been in PVAAS report before, this reports menu might look familiar. So once you log into PVAAS, hover over reports, this is what you see. And when we're talking about today is that student report. Here, I'm going to come up front here to show you my feature of this clicker. Yeah. So that's all the clicker. So I think it also has a laser, but the spotlight I think is the coolest feature here. Okay. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today, this is an example of just one screenshot of a first screen of a student report. But what you'll see, and like I said, this is new to the field. This was just released yesterday. No, last week. This was just released last week. Some of the features to be aware of is that we have an interactive filter panel on the left-hand side. So that's where you can control the data view. You can turn on assessments, you can turn off assessments, you can turn on data tiles, you can turn off data tiles. And then you have an in-tile filter too. So you can further customize the look of your data. And then here you also have access to student demographic information, which is now readily available. Everything, and this is data that's submitted to the Pennsylvania Information Management System, also termed PIMS, from your school district. So any information that your school district shares with PIMS then gets populated here as part of the demographics. This is going to be important because it allows you to sort students, allows you to group them differently, but then it also gives you per individual student, it gives you a view of them as well. All right, we're at a pause point. Any thoughts for consideration so far? We're still chugging along with some information. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Jen to talk about the growth of the system.
Whoops, I didn't mean to advance that quickly. There we go. All right, thank you. So I'm going to try not to move around too much here. So I'm still getting used to this little scooter. What we want to talk about now is we're going to have, Laurie and I are going to go back and forth with different pieces to that student report. Because there's a lot more information now. There were a few of you I know who said you've been into PVAAS. There's a whole lot more now at the student level than we ever had before. So we're going to take it piece by piece. The first piece we want to look at is there is, even within the student report, information to tell you about the system. And that question right there is the whole idea of why we have this even within a student report to say, how does my student or any student I'm looking at, how are their needs been met by my system or the system in which they've been enrolled? Because that's important, right? As we think about our whole system, our tier 1, our core, our tier 2, our tier 3, those students are in there. So is our system growing those students for which that student has been in that system? And that's going to be an important thing to look at. And this is exactly why. All these students are in here getting tier 1 instruction. Everybody's getting tier 1. Some are also getting tier 2, tier 3, but we need to make sure these students are enrolled in with a teacher, in a classroom, in a subject, in a grade. They're in a school system. They're in a district system. They're in all of these systems that we have to make sure if we're putting those students in these systems, we're growing those students. We've got healthy systems to look at. So here's really the question, and you're going to see as we talk about each one of these different pieces of data within the student information, we present a question. Like, what's the question for your team of educators as you're thinking about this? This piece of data about the growth of the system is really saying, hey, I've got a student who is existing within our system. And so what's the growth of that system as that student has moved through our system? How effective have we been at making sure that student is within systems that are growing? So that's really why we want to look at that. Because sometimes it's not always about going down into that student level need. Sometimes we have to back up and say, well, if they haven't been in a system that works, maybe we need to take a step back and also look at our system. What does that core tier 1 look like? What do our supports look like at tier 2, tier 3? So, how many of you, just quick show of hands, recognize these colors? From PVAAS, I should say. These are the PVAAS colors, right? We should hopefully all know the colors, but what those colors mean, right? So, here's what we want you to take away, because there are legends on the report that give you a very more technical, definition of the colors. This is what we want you to walk away with. If you see a blue, whether that's light blue or dark blue on a growth report, it means students gained. They gained ground. A green, they maintained their achievement. Yellow or red, they fell behind. The only difference, and you can kind of see the little words on the right-hand side, if you're seeing a light blue or a dark blue, a yellow or a red, does it mean the same thing, either gaining or falling behind? It's just that the difference between a light blue and a dark blue or a yellow and a red is that we have more data. If we have a dark blue, we've got a little bit more data to say they've gained ground than if you had a light blue, and vice versa, okay? So remember, those are good words to just remember. Here's the thing that I think you really want to make sure we take away. I think we would all agree, the blues are great news. We want to celebrate those and investigate, okay, what are we doing to support those blues? Yellow or red? It's an indicator for action. Okay, something's not quite working, we're falling behind. Action. We get the question a lot. Is green good? It's maintaining, is that good? Usually we'll come back with, is it good enough? That's what you need to think about. If you have students coming in at a high achievement level, and we're seeing greens that they maintain, they can gain ground, they can get the blues. But if I see a green for students coming in high achieving, that's going to have a very different implication than if I say, oh, I've got students entering low achieving and getting a green. Think about what that means. They're coming in low achieving, we're maintaining. We don't want to maintain low achievement. So we always say, like, if you're seeing green, think about who those students are. If they're low achieving students, not going to be enough. We need to get the blues with those students, okay? So just a little bit of background on that, because here's why those colors become important to know. On the student report, you will now see what's called a value-added tile. So you're going to hear Laurie and I talk a lot about these tiles of information that are available on this student report. One of them, and you can see on, now how do I use a spotlight? Oh, there it is, over here. Right there, you see on the data tiles that you can turn on or off in that left filter panel, there's one for the value added. You turn that on, and it's going to highlight this information where you can see the student's history here right in the center. This student in math, 22, 23, what was the system and the growth of the system in which they're enrolled? And you always see like this little number in the bottom right corner. That says that's what grade level. So to remind you, so when the student was in 6th grade, they were in a district system that was gaining. In 7th grade math, they were in a district system that was helping the students gain. So that's important to know. You can see that, growth of the school. You can see the growth of the teacher as well. Now, I'm going to advance this real quick because I think this is really important to know. Not everybody is going to see everything on this tile because it really goes by your local decisions of who should see this teacher data. Not everybody should, okay? You as teachers, we got a lot of teachers in the room, you would only see this for you. If you've had that student and that's your teacher data, you will see that. You will never see anybody else's teacher data, okay? Principals, a district administrator, they have access to that, okay? Because they're an evaluation role, okay? Local districts make that decision about who else should see, because there might be assistant superintendents, there might be assistant principals that are in those roles that should be seeing some of that teacher data. And it would be the same thing. You're a teacher, you may only have access to the school data and not even the district data. So you're going to only see what it is that you have access to, okay? So I do want to make sure that you're aware of that, okay? That is a protection, right? So that's also important to know. If you don't have access to any of that growth data, you're not going to even see that tile. The tile, I think, appears, but it just basically says no access, no data available. That's what it means for you, okay? So I'm going to stop here. Here's a pause point. It's like another elbow partner kind of moment, okay? Kind of think about, maybe pick one of those questions. Why is it important for you, do you think, to look at your system level when you're looking at the student data? Why is that important to even look at it at the student level? Like the growth of the system, of the system that they've been in. Other data sources that you think would be important to put up as a part of that? And then how do you think you could use that? If you do have access to that data, the principal may be in the room. How could you use that in planning? Okay, so take 2 minutes. Pick one of those questions and talk to a partner about that. Let's go ahead and come back. We're going to ask maybe 2 people to kind of report out very quickly, something that you talked about related to these 3 questions. So who wants to share? I'm going to pick 2 people. Okay, go ahead.
We discussed about what interventions are working, what's not working, and use that data to help support either way.
Yeah, so I think it's important, thinking when you do see some of those, oh, it's a lower achieving student, I see that green, maybe I'll think about that, the yellow or red, right? Is it not working? Has things in the past not worked? Or you see those blues. It's been working, so how do we keep doing that? Great. Someone else. Someone else want to share something different, a different question maybe you talked about. No one else want to share? All right. We'll have other pause points. We'll be asking you to share all along, so just be prepared for that. All right. One thing I do want to point out is just a quick resource before I hand this over to Laurie. These are called Digging Deeper guides. If you find that you have systems, you've got programs that do need to be strengthened, especially thinking about Tier 1 and core instruction, these are helpful guides to help you focus conversations on things that we can control as educators. Curriculum, instruction, assessment, and how we're organized in our systems, our classrooms. These help with those questions. So you don't have to be thinking about all those potential root causes of why something might be working or not. This is a guide to help you do that. We have them from every subject area. We have them focused on strategies and factors for students with high achievement, students with low achievement as well. So you may want to check those out. Okay? Here.
All right, the next set of data that we're going to look at within PVAAS is assessment history. Students' assessment history. So we want to ask the question, what's the student's achievement trend? based on state and local assessments. I keep saying and local assessments because districts have the option to upload local assessment data into PVAAS for analysis. So if you are using a local assessment like MAP, like STAR, like Acadians, like iReady, like AimsWeb, you have the choice to upload that type of data into PVAAS, and it will be included in the student's assessment history, and then it'll also be included for growth analysis so that you get just a different data point to consider. So you're working with your data team. You have the question, what's the student's past achievement trend, at least based on state assessments, because it's definitely in PVAAS, but maybe even on local assessments, if your district has selected to participate like that. But why even consider this? Why even consider this as a data source? Well, your past achievement trends can help identify areas of relative strength and then also areas for growth. So as you'll see on this example of a student data tile, you can see the past history. It's nice graphical representation. You get a really quick view on how the student is trending across time. So this is I think the main, I would call it, tile. The testing information tile has the most amount of information on it. And this one is looking back at a student's prior PSSA history in math. And you can see here on the in tile filter, PSSA is on and math is on. But just as easily, you could toggle the button and turn reading on as well. This is what's going to show on your screen first, that data trend. But if you are interested in like exact scores, you would just scroll down a little bit and then it would reveal the testing history table. So you're first going to get that graphical trend, that line plot, that line graph, and then you can scroll down and look at the table. Okay, so I said before we're going to jump into the data. This is our opportunity to jump in the data. So if you do not have a device, but you see someone close to you, maybe you could ask to elbow partner up. But you can access PVAAS on your phone too, so it's not just a web interface. So you can use your computer, you can use your phone, you can use anything really to log into PVAAS. For our practice today, we are going to utilize a demo account so that we're not revealing any specific student data. If you want to use specific student data, you could log in with your own account or follow along with ours. So I'll just give a moment in case you would like to log in or find the website. I guess what I don't have up here is the website, which is PVAAS, PVAAS.sas.com. I'm going to go out to the website. All right, so the website is this on? Thank you. The website is PVAAS, PVAAS.sas.com. And I have my demo data, my login preloaded. It's allstarda.admin21, and then the password was 2023 Penn Demo Site. Give me some sort of indicator when you're ready to move on, because I'm going to show you your initial click path to get to student level data. Thank you. Yeah, want me to put that back up, the username and password for the demo data?
And feel free after today to use that as well. That is not just for today.
Once you're ready, pop a thumbs up for me so I can get an idea. Thank you. Thanks. Couple of pictures. Okay. All right. So once I'm on the PVAAS page, I'm in my demo account. I'm going to hit login. You will get faced with this confidential information block. Remember that when you are in PVAAS, you do have access to quite a bit of data. So they do ask you to acknowledge that this is confidential, and then you keep it within the people who are supposed to know about it. So this is student data, and it's fake. So there's no confidentiality here. All right, so this landed us on a value-added report in PVAAS. This is one of the looking back reports. We're going to talk more about this report at the 11 a.m. session when we're talking about the system. But for our purposes today at 8 a.m., we're going to hover over the reports menu at the top of the screen, and it'll show you what you have access to. So if you happen to log in using your own account and you don't see all these options, that's just an indicator of what you have access to. So if you don't see student reports, like I have it right here on my screen, I have student reports and then I have student report. If you don't see that, that's an indicator that you do not have access to student level data. And the way to get access to student level data is to go back to your school and ask for it and see if that's something that they're willing to give you. All of that is controlled locally. So here's where we're going to go. We're going to go to student report, and I'm going to click on it. And then it's going to ask me what student I want to investigate. Now, I'm in a demo account, as I mentioned. If you're logging in your account, you're going to be limited to whatever schools you can view. So if you can view all the schools in your district, then all the schools in the district will appear in your drop-down. If you can view only your school, then only your school will appear in the drop-down. But for this demo account, they have a whole lot of different schools. You can choose to view a whole grade level of students. So I will just pull up some 8th graders here. I'm using 8th grade as my example because I'm just looking for kids that have some testing history. If I chose a 4th grader, they would have a tile. It just would have very little information because they haven't been testing in the state for very long by 4th grade. Okay, so mine says student 1686. Yours would say the student names, so you would recognize the names once you're in there, so you don't need to just know their PA Secure ID off the top of your head. Okay, so now this brings us to our student tile. And you can see I have my left-hand filter panel. I can turn on PSSA and Keystone, they're already on. I could turn on PSAT, I could turn on AP, I could turn on Access for ELS. I could turn on and off as many assessments as I would like, and that just controls my assessment history display in the center. So if you are working with an English language learner population, you would turn on Access for ELS, and then you would be able to see their history there. So for student testing information, and this section is just on the history, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. You can see that I have PSSA subjects here, and I have math toggled. So now what I'm looking at is the student's assessment history across time. And the dots are colored. And the colors of the dots tell you if they scored below basic, basic, proficient, or advanced. So you can see at one visualization how the student has trending. What's their trend across time? There's lots of other features to this tile that we're going to get to. But for right now, take a look at the assessment history, find a student, either a demo student or one of your students, and think about these questions. What's the student's achievement trend based on data? If this is your student that you know about, you want to be thinking like, okay, well, has the student been involved in any interventions? What's the student's plan? And then are there any other data sources you would like to consider in your analysis? So just take a moment to explore testing history, and then we're going to move on to another feature after testing history. Individual students, so I'm not at this point going to ask you to share your individual student data trends, but hopefully you're getting the idea that data is available here at the individual student level to help inform discussions like this. But really, we just did the most basic of the discussions. Jen is going to take over what I think is maybe the most interesting feature on this, or at least it was when I was an educator.
Yeah, and this is, oh, go ahead, question though.
Just when looking at the data, I was on the demo, but on the side where it's NCE.
Yeah. So, and NCE, we were actually just talking about it up here too. So, in Pennsylvania, our state assessments are not scaled on what we normally would call a vertical scale, where you can go, okay, I can compare that scale score from year to year. We can't. It's not a bad thing. It's just that's not how our state assessment is scaled. So that is a good thing to know. If you have students, you're looking at a fourth grade, then what did they do in fifth grade, sixth grade? Don't compare the scale score. They mean different things. So what we do in PVAAS, we convert those scale scores to an NCE scale because that's a common scale that's used. And it's used in a lot of other areas too, but it's a common scale to give you a reference. It is virtually most scores are going to be between 1 and 99, with 50 being the average. You may see some students go below 0. Some students go above 100. It is possible. To give you just a reference point, when you know 50 is the average, as you start to get up into those 70s, 80s, and 90s, like really high achievement, you start to get into 30s, 20s, definitely lower achievement. So does that help? We also have a resource. If you are, I don't think we included it here, but there is a resource to help you understand NCEs. It's quick. It's got nice visuals. Email our team. We have our contact information in here. We'll make sure you get that. Any other questions? And does that help? Yes. Okay. Good. All right. So 2 pieces. I know Laurie said this she thinks is most exciting. I agree, but I'm also agree about the next section she's going to do on projections. So what we're going to talk about here, we never had this before, but a lot of districts were looking for it. And Laurie did, like she said, in her whole past role as a district, administrator, and thinking about her role in federal programs, like, is my programs working? Is the student scoring as I would have expected them to score, being given their history? Are they meeting that? Is our programming helping the student to meet that? That's really what this data is going to help you answer. Did that student meet or beat the expected score or their predicted score? Because it does provide insight into, was that student in a program that they responded to it? Was that program effective for them and the outcome that we wanted? We want them to at least meet their predicted scores, because those predicted scores are based on their history. So here's where you can find that. We're still, as you can see, in this testing information tile. So if you have that turned on, that's where you're going to find this past predicted. This is kind of what it looks like when you turn it on. So I'm just going to go over here and show. Remember how Laurie was telling you there's this internal filter panel? You've got this option under growth across time for past predicted. That's what we're turning on. Now I'm going to go through these pieces because you're probably looking at this going, what is that? What does that look like? I can't make sense of that. So we're going to break it down a little bit for you. I just showed you where that past predicted was, but that's just a highlight. That internal filter, that's what you're going to turn on. Here's what I'm going to have you do. Who recognizes this? I'll recognize this, right? I know we got the title on here. It's the bell curve, right? It's our normal distribution that we have. Here's what I'm going to have you do. Like, I've got my handlebars on here. 10? Oh, there. Yeah. So remember, you've got everybody do this. You've got your handlebars here. You've got the tails. You're grabbing that whole bell curve. You're going to go like this. You're going to rotate it. That's exactly what you're going to do. You see what happens? That's exactly what it is on that graph. It is a bell curve. We've just rotated it. So now that it's on its side, okay? When we do that and you have this, that's what it's going to look like. I know we've kind of just like superimposed one, kind of made one, but here's what it looks like on your report. So when you have it on the side, whoops. That dotted line right in the middle of that bell curve, that says that's how that student was predicted to score. That bell curve is saying for that student and that student's history, those are all the possible predicted scores of students who are like them tend to score with that history. That dotted line says that's the most likely though. Most students score there with that kind of history. You can see the symbol kind of overlaid somewhere on that graph in that same area. that would tell me that student met their predicted score. So you can see their actual, that right here, their actual fell right on how they were expected or predicted to score. So let me kind of break this down on an actual report so you can see what I'm talking about. That curve, that bell curve that's on its side, like I said, represents all of those predicted scores that that student could have done based on their history, and students who have also had that history in the past. But the dotted line represents, because that's at the top of the bell curve, that's the most typical. So that's what we call the predicted score for the student. Look right at that dotted line. Now what we would say is, though, look at where that student actually scored, that shape. Yep. So that you can see, what would you say about that one? Did they meet? Predicted? Did they exceed it? Did they fall short of it? They did a little better, right? That symbol's above the dotted line. So that's telling us now, we went way in the future, 2113. That student performed better than we would have predicted given their history. That's important for me to know, because I want to think back to that year. Were they a recipient of some intervention, supports, something that helped them beat that predicted score? Okay? So what do you think about this one? Did they meet their predicted, exceed it? Just shout it out. What do you think? They met it. Yep, they met it. What about the next year? What happened the next year? Whoa, I would want to know that. Like, what happened right there? We need to dig into that, because something didn't work for that student. They fell way short of their predicted. And then finally, what about here? In the last year, yeah, they went way above.
How do you change where the bell curve is? Because on mine,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't see that. I was curious.
Yep. So right down here.
Okay, I'm on my phone.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, right here. Yes, and here I'm going to go back here. For the sake of time, I didn't go over this, but I should. So right here. And maybe actually, yeah, if you want to highlight, right here underneath the graph, you see these little dots. That's, if you click on those little radial dots, that'll move for each year so that you can get that visual. Here's also what I do want to tell you about this, because this can be a little deceiving. Do you notice it says 64? It looks like it says 64%.
Yeah, mine's like 40.
Right. See how it says percentile? That's really not a percent. It's a percentile. What this is saying is, remember we have that bell curve? Those are all the possible predicted scores for that student.
Okay.
He scored at the 64th percentile of everything he could have. So if you think about that, if you see that number saying 50, you could just see the number and not the visual and go, oh, they met their predicted score. If you see that number above 50, they've exceeded that predicted score. Below 50, they haven't. So you could even look at those numbers to say, without even the visual. Sometimes the visual is nice. It helps. So you can always click on that. Okay? Mm-hmm.
If I'm looking at this for like a child study team, is there a way that I can download this report and to download this visual into the report that I'm creating?
So this is new, so that's a great question. You can, it places download. I'm not positive on that. Right. I mean, right. What you can do is there is a print option that says print this page, and you can actually save it as a PDF. But I'm not sure how that works with all the visuals. You're right. So we'll definitely investigate that. And yeah, if you want to leave your email with us, we'll definitely. Great question. Any other questions with that? because I want to think were we going to have them explore that, right?
Yeah, certainly. Mess around with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Push that button, track over time. Again, students with a more robust testing history, you'll be able to track through them a little bit better. So I see, here I can turn on past predicted, and then once I turn on past predicted, then I can toggle. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll up. Thanks. There we go. Past predicted, and then I can just toggle over the years to watch the curve move. The numbers here indicate at what percentile of their own personal curve they scored. And we do have a print option, but the export option isn't going to get you what you want. So it's printing as a PDF.
Yeah, I would suggest just try that, but we'll play with that. And honestly, it's with this. Oh.
And here I hit the print button, and this is what you could be able to save as a PDF.
So there. So she displayed, you could print it, but you would have to print it for each curve, right? But I'll tell you what, that is good feedback for us to take back to team. It's a new report. So as we learn what could be helpful, we'll take that back. That's great. So yeah, let's do, we have like 15 minutes. I'm thinking, why don't we take 2-3 minutes? Sounds like you're already exploring a little bit. Why don't you take another like 2 minutes? Explore with either a demo or a live student in one of your students, and then see if you have other questions or thoughts. Like, here's what we were going to have you think about. Is there something that surprised you? What's that telling you? What do you want? Like, what more questions is that raising for you about that student in terms of their past programming?
Sure. So when it comes to building projections, and we'll talk more about projections in the last section here, we utilize their past assessment data. Now, a neat thing about our PSSAs is that they're all correlated assessments. So the ELA and the math assessments are correlated. So we can use how the students performed on those two assessments to make a prediction about how they'll score on the science assessment. And we also know something else pretty cool. We know how every other fourth grader who's taken the science, we know how they scored. So because we're able to access that statewide data, we have that history of how fourth graders typically score on the science assessment, and then we're able to pair that with an individual student's assessment history, and we make a prediction.
And just to give you an idea that with that, we can always share a resource where you can get the correlations, but for science, they generally run between about 0.76 and 0.79. So if you're familiar with like correlations and like they go from like 0 to 1, in education, anything that you start to see above like even 0.6 or even a 0.7, like that's pretty high. And they're all, I think our lowest one is a 0.76, so.
I think at that point, let's just talk projections. Let's talk projections. So we talked about a lot of stuff that's already happened, right? The tests got taken. Did they meet their predicted score? Did they exceed their predicted score? Did they fall short of their predicted score? What programming were they involved in? What's the relationship there? Now we have this piece of actionable data. So teachers in the classroom, you're like, yeah, that's great, the trends, but those kids are in the next grade level. I have kids in front of me today. And that's right, you do have kids in front of you today. And so we have a prediction today on how well those students will perform. And I will say right off the bat about predictions, it's influenced by instruction. So we say that students can meet or beat their predictions. So these are not set in stone. So when you're looking at your data team, what question would you ask your data team? Well, how is this student predicted to perform? This piece of data might help us in conjunction with your local assessment plan. It provides insight on maybe what level of intervention the student need or what level of enrichment they might be interested in order to help them meet their goal. So there is a whole tile for student projections. You can turn it on the main left-hand tile. You can turn off the other ones and just have the projection tile on. So what this will show you is the percentage of likelihood that a student will fall in a range. So what's the percent likelihood that the student will be below basic? It's always 100%, because if you show up on testing day and put your name on the paper, you're guaranteed at least below basic. So that's always at 100%. And then basic, proficient, advanced, that goes, those are based on your testing history. Now, this is one view of it, and you certainly can use the tile. It collects them all in one place. So this would be if you're in that student study meeting, you're talking across grade levels, you're talking like, what do we want to do for this student as a whole, across their whole schedule, across their whole programming. The student projection tile might be a really good place to go. You can also view it in the testing information tile, which is what I'll demonstrate in just a second. But just a note about this, let's interpret these projections with MTSS in mind. If you see that you have a student with a greater than 70% likelihood of reaching that benchmark, that means that they're very likely to meet whatever benchmark you set, proficient, advanced, basic, whatever you're talking about. So an indication would be continue the student's current programming, investigate what worked, and make sure that that student remains on the path toward meeting or exceeding that prediction. So greater than 70% likelihood, you just want to shore up, making sure that they stay on the path they're already on. If you start seeing likelihoods but between 40 and 70, that's an indicator that the students may or may not reach their indicated benchmark. Like, think of it about weather. If it's 70% likely to snow, I'm probably going to bring my car scraper with me so I can get out of the parking lot. If it's 40% likely to snow and my car scraper is in the shed and it was cold this morning, I might risk it. So you use the likelihoods as think about weather. Are they in the middle? Because at the 40% likelihood, you might want to look at different programming to increase that student's likelihood. And then if it's less than 40%, this kid is likely in need of intervention. So if you're looking at less than 40%, we probably need to have some significant changes to the student's current programming in order to put them on a different path. Does all that track? And what we would do, we always say, these are calls to action. This has not happened yet. This is just likelihood. So this is a call to action. This is something that curriculum, instruction, assessment, organization, all of that can influence. All right, so we've been playing in the student testing tile with the past predicted. Did you notice that right under it is future projected? So you can just press that button right under it, and then you'll see the drop down, and then you can choose off your math assessments, whatever you want to project out to. Please notice that it's not just projection to the end of the year this year. You can project out to the end of the year next year as well. So these projections are here now the whole year. So when you're facing decisions in math programming and math pathways about whether or not a student should take algebra in 8th grade, well, right now you can project out to end of year 7th grade, end of year 8th grade, and out at Keystone Algebra. So these projections are available to help make scheduling decisions come springtime. You don't just have to use it 1 year in advance. They're also very accurate 2 years in advance. So if you turn on the future projected radial button, this is what it looked like. Remember, past predicted was on the graph itself and you moved in the years that happened. Future projected hasn't happened yet, so it's off the graph. So you'll see the same curve that you had before, but now instead of popping up on the graph, it's directly next to the graph as something that hasn't happened yet. But remember, the student's own personal most likely score is at the dotted line. So this dotted line is right here in the proficient range. So the student is most likely to score in proficient. However, they have a likelihood for all of the achievement levels represented here as well. And just as a reminder, you would interpret it the same way as before. There is the curve representing all of the possible likely scores for the student. The dotted line represents the most likely score for the student. The shaded areas display the probability for each indicator: basic, below basic, proficient, advanced. And you also have the probabilities for each written in number form to the right. So this is another pause point, so you can turn and play around with the projections. But as we're thinking about it, as you're looking at the projections, think about instructional planning. How can they help to target instruction? How can they help support tiered supports? Course placements, I started talking a little bit about the Algebra 1 decision, and math pathways. And just to say, remember that this stuff has not happened yet. Projections take place before the students take the assessment, and that's why we call it a call to action. There's decisions that you can make today that help to influence the projections tomorrow.
All right. We do look like we have about 5 minutes left. We were going to have you discuss these questions, but I think for the sake of time, we just want you to make sure that you're aware of what you would want to think about in terms of what we've talked about for this last hour. Like, what do you think your next steps will be as you take this new information? How are you going to use it in your role? We know we have teachers in the room, principals, some district leaders, coaches. You're all in very different roles. But I think you hopefully can see different ways you might be able to use that. And be thinking about what other resources and supports you might need. Some of you have indicated those questions that you've had today. So we just want to end with a couple of those. I'm going to ask actually our patent folks. We uploaded this PowerPoint. Does everybody know where to go to get them? Okay. So, you don't know.
It's not on there. It's not on there.
If it's not there, we'll get it up there.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say we uploaded it, right? I think on Monday, but we'll make sure then, because make sure you can get the PowerPoint. If you can't, email us, okay? Because there's a lot of links to resources in this PowerPoint. Couple of things just to take away. We went through a past predicted. We went through the future projected. Here's the questions we often get, like, well, which one would I use? This is an important piece to take away. Both of them are calculated based on that student's testing history. We've got that relationship between the assessments. The difference is that future projected, like Laurie was saying, it hasn't happened yet. So, but we are using what we know about students who have taken that assessment. That, as you can see on the left-hand side, that's used to plan for the future. Think about that windshield we were talking about. That's what that is. That projection, future projected, you pick that about what am I planning for the student in the future. The past predicted, it's based on, well, you know what do kids like that in that year? How did they perform? You want to use that and select that when you're thinking about what was the impact of the instruction and programming for that student in that year. So it's more like that reflecting back piece, that side mirror, that rear view mirror, okay? So just a couple of things. Make sure if you go out to the PowerPoint, we do have a desk reference on where to click. If I want to find this information, what click path do I use? This is a nice desk reference to have, okay? So we've provided a link to that. Just if you do need some support around MTSS, we want to make sure you know where to go, the state lead as well as your lead in your region of the East, Central, and West. So those folks are there to support you. There's our email address for Laurie, for me, for our whole team at the very bottom. PVAAS with 2 A's, not 2 S's, at iu13.org. That goes to our entire team. So that's probably the best way to reach us. But we also have a flyer, like if you're looking for some support, We can also, we have one-to-one data sessions all the time. When we're not here, Laurie and I are in those most days. So feel free to reach out to us. Just know that login page before you log in has a bunch of resources, links on there. There are links specific to your role. If you're a teacher, you're a principal, go to that link because those resources are specific to you in using PVAAS. We've got all kinds of video recordings, e-learning, which go through every report. It's an interactive professional learning module just for you. So we'd like to point that out. Good help menu system if you're in the system. But there you go. There's our email address. Take a screenshot out of whatever you need to do. But yeah, we'll make sure this PowerPoint is up there. You've got contacts at every intermediate unit. So these resources are all going to be in that PowerPoint. But if you want to capture it, the last thing that we would ask is if you don't mind, especially if this is a new report, we're learning about it. We'd love to have your feedback about this session too, how this connected for you in terms of your implementation of MTSS. So if use the QR code, use that URL there. If you wouldn't mind, it's a 5-minute survey pretty much. Give us some feedback. We'd love to have that. Okay? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you one more time to Jen and Lori. We appreciate your attendance. Can we have one more round of applause for them, please? And we hope you have a great rest of your day.